So I wanted to start the conversation just by focusing on one of the key elements in your work, which is Black economic empowerment. It sounds very nice, empowering Black South Africans, but that is misleading. It's, I would argue, one of the most dangerous policy paradigms that we have in South Africa. Very insidiously affects almost every aspect of our economic lives in this country. Speak to me about the work that Sakeliga is doing in resisting BEE, but before you do that, also help our audience to understand just exactly how BEE is structured in the current context.
Yes, David, Black economic empowerment is a government term for a very harmful policy. And in its best formulation, in its best understanding, Black economic empowerment is about creating flourishing Black communities. It has not achieved that, and it has been pursued to the detriment of Black communities and also to everybody else in the country. Black economic empowerment, we've identified, came in three waves, you could say. The first dates back right to 1994. And when the ANC entered government, it was really very early on that they started introducing what was called Black economic empowerment or empowerment deals at the time. It wasn't a legislated period, and it also came on the back of an impressive freeing up of the economy. The apartheid restrictions, most of them, virtually all of those restrictions were removed by 1994. And so we're at the low point of race-based restrictions in the economy in South Africa. And as you could expect, this opens up massive opportunities for business and economic interaction across community lines, unprecedented in the history of this country. And that leads to lots of economic growth. It's a flourishing time in many respects. It has its strains, but it's doing well. But you have you also have lots of goodwill among people who now can freely associate before they couldn't. And I think many companies, white-owned or black-owned at that time, just sought to do business together, and you see transactions happening, some of them with merit and some of them without merit. But you have some political pressure also ramping up, and some people become fabulously wealthy in this unlegislated but combined period of economic opening up with political pressure. People like Cyril Ramaphosa becomes fabulously wealthy in this period. This changes. The second wave comes about in around the early 2000s with two acts. So where we had in the 90s a non-legislated, non-statutory phase, you could say that BEE really enters a statutory phase in the early 2000s with the Black Economic Empowerment Act of 2002-3 and the Procurement Framework Act of around the same time. And that makes BEE a requirement for doing government to private sector contracting. And it has some chain reactions because it has a supply chain scorecard tie-in. And so for the next basically 15 years after that, 10, 15, 20 years, you have a period where the ability to contract with the state becomes subject to the race of the companies doing business. And it sounds great because this empowerment term, this transformation term keeps coming up. But in fact, what you're doing is you're prioritizing the company instead of the recipient of the service or the good that must be procured and provided. So it's an inversion of the order of preference. And so some people, again, become fabulously wealthy. But goods and services, the quality deteriorate, the pool of suppliers contract. And it really distorts the whole economic supply chain into government. And much of the collapse, state failure of the last 20 years really has to do with that. Not only, but that's a major explanation. Then we're now what we call in the third wave of BEE. This starts in around 2018. The first of the legislation that changed to bring us to the third wave was the Competition Act. When in 2018, a clause was introduced that said it in the public interest, the Competition Commission can now use the racial composition or the historically disadvantaged composition or the ownership and the employment and so on of companies to prohibit or allow or set conditions on deals, mergers, acquisitions, debt financing, and so on. And we've seen many iterations subsequent in aviation, in telecommunications. Starlink is an example, but all over right through the economy. We're now in the third wave of BEE, where contrary to the second wave, where the government contracting relationship was subjected to BEE, in this third wave, just participating in the economy as a business, licensing to enter and to do economic activity, doing normal business-to-business transactions are becoming subject to BEE. So we're basically in this today in South Africa in an accelerating phase of race-based economic licensing, race-based economic access control. That's the short version of where BEE has brought us, and sounds great, but it's very harmful and we must stop it.
Yeah, and I think a useful lens with which to view something like BEE is the politicization of the economy. In previous conversations, you and I have often spoken about the relationship between government and business. And I think business has often gone along to get along with a policy like BEE. It wants to show its goodwill towards the government, wants to genuinely and sincerely, I think, empower Black South Africans and include Black South Africans meaningfully in the economy. But how that's played out is actually in increasing levels of political control over private organizations or corporations. So many of these JSE-listed firms have an ANC cadre on their board.
Yes.
And I think the mistake they often make is, well, having a politically exposed person on our board gives us an opportunity to influence and to lobby and to show the political class about the importance of the private sector and what it contributes to the economy. But actually what happens is the reverse, that it enables political influence to insert itself within the boardroom, and it compels companies to start towing the line in terms of the prevailing political power in this country.
Yes, I'm afraid as much as there are, of course, companies who do very well, even those with a man from Pretoria on their board, but the BEE has distorted, and it's, we must look beyond skin color here. Just because some black people are on the boards of some companies, it doesn't mean that that circle isn't actually quite small. Professor William Gumede recently wrote an article last week or so where he pointed out how small this circle of just a few hundred people actually are who've benefited so massively from these deals, and I mean their family connections aren't that large. So yes, it does go right through into local municipal level, but really the people who profited most is not such a big circle. And so while it may look like transformation or it may look like black economic empowerment, it is it's a special kind of person, and you get this in all communities, all civilizations, all cultural groups. You get people who are willing and who are attracted by the easy path to wealth and riches and influence, and some say the worst rise to the top. Because the entrepreneurial path is a hard way, and it's much more easy to lobby for a position and a handout or a transaction. And I'm afraid that sometimes skin color obscures just how small the patronage network actually is.
Yeah, so I suppose another way of thinking of your three waves of BEE is that it moved from being a vertical application of BEE, the state and the private sector and that relationship.
Yes.
But now the state is forcing a horizontal application of BEE between private entities.
Yes.
And I think, one of I mentioned that term insidious ways in which it does that is it affects an entire supply chain, because if you're at the apex of the supply chain and you're the interface with the state, you then impose these requirements all the way down through your suppliers. And so if you want to do business with the big guys, and the big guys are in bed with government, then you have to abide by those restrictions.
I think insidious is a good word. Now, I would say I would even use the word totalitarian, not easily so, because it may sound like a word that distracts, but I think it accurately, if we just clinically use the word totalitarian, it actually reveals what's going on.
It's total.
It's a total extension of the state elite and their vision for society into every subsection, and not every subsection of the state, every section of society. It actually sees all elements of society as a subsection of the state. We see this with black economic empowerment and this horizontal application where we're making normal business-to-business interactions, participation in the economy, subject to a BEE precondition. But we also see this in something that has not caught the international attention enough yet. It's bound to do so in the next few months, I would say, which is the Employment Equity Amendment Act and the regulations published about 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago. These new employment equity regulations prescribe very strict quotas for especially white male employment. There are other dimensions to this as well, but really the target is reducing white male employment. Now, it's not that the white male employment should be restricted in the aggregate. Same with BEE. It's not like black ownership should be targeted or striven for in the aggregate. It is the government's intention and their program of action to apply this to every company, to every sphere of society, even to non-profits. And so any company now with 50 or more employees from September in this country, South Africa, they will have to mimic the racial demographics of the state as prescribed in these quotas by the minister. So the point here is why I call it totalitarian is because it's extending the state ideology into the homes, the non-profits, the churches, the businesses, actually the fiber of society. And I think that's why it's insidious, but a stronger and more accurate word I think would be totalitarian.